she sat alone for 3 hours in a 5-star restaurant, deeply humiliated, and stood up. But when the heavy mahogany doors suddenly deadbolted and the city's most ruthless syndicate boss slid into the booth opposite her, she realized her blind date hadn't ghosted her. He'd used her as bait. The ice in Harley Bennett's water glass had melted 2 hours ago. Sitting in the dimly lit, opulent dining room of Il Cigno Bianco, one of Chicago's most exclusive Italian restaurants, she felt the familiar heavy sting of humiliation settling into her bones. It was 10:15 p.m. Her reservation had been for 7 o'clock. Harley smoothed the fabric of her deep emerald wrap dress over her thick thighs. She had spent a week's salary on the dress, specifically because the boutique owner had promised her. It hugged her full hips and generous curves in a way that commanded attention. And it did. When she had walked into the restaurant 3 hours earlier, she felt beautiful. At 240 pounds, Harley was used to navigating a world that often wanted her to apologize for the space she took up. But tonight, she had refused to apologize. Tonight was supposed to be a fresh start. Her blind date, Jared Tompkins, had seemed perfect on the phone. They had matched on a high-end dating app 3 weeks ago. He was charming, attentive, and most importantly, he had made her feel genuinely desired. He had told her he loved a woman with substance, someone soft and real. He had insisted on Il Cigno Bianco pulling strings to get a table telling her to dress to the nines. And then he never showed. Would you care for another glass of water? Miss. The waiter, a young man named Thomas, offered her a tight, pitying smile. It was the 4th time he had checked on her. No thank you, Thomas. I think I'll just take the check for the sparkling water and the bread basket. Harley said, her voice remarkably steady, despite the hot tears threatening the back of her eyes. Of course. Take your time. As Thomas walked away, Harley pulled out her phone. 3 unread messages from her best friend Sarah asking how the date was going. 0 messages from Jared. She blocked his number, a sigh of profound exhaustion escaping her lips. It wasn't just the fact that she had been stood up. It was the cruel elaboration of the prank. Why go through weeks of texting, late-night phone calls, and booking a Michelin-star restaurant just to leave her sitting alone in a room full of wealthy couples? She reached for her purse, ready to escape into the anonymity of the cold Chicago night when the atmosphere in the restaurant suddenly shifted. It didn't happen with a shout or a scream. It happened with a suffocating, terrifying silence. The low hum of polite conversation died abruptly. The soft jazz playing through the overhead speakers was cut off mid-note. Harley looked up, her brow furrowing. The maître d', a usually unflappable man who had sneered at her when she arrived alone, was now ghostly pale, stepping hastily away from the front entrance. 4 men in impeccably tailored dark charcoal suits stepped into the dining room. They didn't look like diners. They moved with a predatory, coordinated grace, their hands casually resting near the inner lapels of their jackets. But it was the man who walked in behind them that made the air in the room turn to ice. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and possessed a dark, lethal elegance that commanded absolute obedience. His midnight black hair was swept back, and his sharp, aristocratic jawline looked like it had been carved from marble. He wasn't just handsome, he was terrifying. There was a cold, dead calm in his piercing grey eyes. As he swept his gaze across the room, Harley recognized him instantly, though she had never seen him in person. Anyone who read the local news or understood the unspoken hierarchy of the city knew who he was. Cassian Moretti. He was the head of the Moretti Syndicate, a ruthless empire built on blood gambling and shipping lanes. He was a ghost to the authorities, a man who evaded every federal indictment with a chilling smile and a trail of missing witnesses. Ladies and gentlemen, One of Cassian's men announced his voice, carrying effortlessly across the silent room. The restaurant is now closed for a private event. You will leave your meals. You will leave through the kitchen exit. You will not look back. Panic erupted, but it was a muffled, terrified panic. Chairs scraped against the hardwood floors as wealthy socialites and businessmen scrambled to their feet, practically tripping over themselves, to rush toward the swinging kitchen doors. Nobody asked for their check. Nobody complained about their unfinished lobster ravioli. The sheer presence of Cassian Moretti standing near the entrance was enough to guarantee absolute compliance. Harley remained frozen in her booth. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She told her legs to move to stand up and join the fleeing herd, but sheer terror had paralyzed her. Within 90 seconds, the bustling restaurant was completely empty. Save for the heavily armed men, the trembling waitstaff huddled in the corner, and Harley. Cassian raised a hand, a subtle sharp flick of his wrist. The heavy oak front doors swung shut. A heavy metal deadbolt slid into place with a loud final clack. Cassian finally moved. His polished leather shoes made no sound on the floor as he bypassed the empty tables, walking straight toward the back corner, straight toward Harley. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. She tried to make herself small, wishing her vibrant green dress didn't stand out so loudly against the muted tones of the restaurant. Cassian stopped at her table. Up close, the sheer physical dominance of the man was overwhelming. He smelled of expensive bergamot dark espresso and something sharp and metallic that Harley instinctively recognized as danger. He looked down at her, his grey eyes calculating, taking in her terrified face, her trembling hands, and the empty chair across from her. Without asking for permission, the city's most dangerous man slid into the leather booth, sitting in the exact spot Jared was supposed to occupy. "You must be the accountant," Cassian said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that sent a shiver down Harley's spine. Harley blinked, her panic momentarily short-circuiting. What? The accountant?" Cassian repeated, slowly leaning forward. He reached out his large, calloused hand, lightly tracing the rim of Jared's empty water glass. "Though I admit you don't look like a woman who spends her life hiding numbers for thieves. Tell me, where is Jared Tompkins?" The name dropped like a lead weight between them. Jared Tompkins. Harley's mind spun violently. "Jared!" She croaked out her voice, barely above a whisper. You know Jared." Cassian tilted his head, a dark, humorless smile playing on his lips. "Know him. I employ him. Or rather, I did employ him until yesterday evening when I discovered a $4 million discrepancy in my shipping ledgers. A discrepancy that Mr. Tompkins was responsible for overseeing." Harley stared at the mob boss, the puzzle pieces violently rearranging themselves in her brain. Jared wasn't a sweet, slightly awkward software developer like his dating profile claimed. He was a mob accountant, a money launderer. "He told my associates he was meeting his partner here tonight." Cassian continued, his eyes locking onto hers. "He said his partner had the flash drive with the offshore routing numbers. He swore on his mother's life that if we let him come to Il Cigno Bianco, he would hand over the money." Cassian leaned back, spreading his hands. "Yet here I am, and Jared is nowhere to be found. Only you." The reality of the situation crashed over Harley like freezing water. Jared hadn't just stood her up. He had used her. He had set up a highly visible blind date at an exclusive restaurant, fully aware that the Moretti family would track him there. He had used her as a decoy, a distraction, to buy himself time to run, leaving her sitting alone to face the wrath of a ruthless syndicate boss who thought she was his accomplice. The paralyzing fear that had gripped Harley's chest suddenly evaporated, entirely consumed by a blinding white-hot fury. That son of a bitch! Harley whispered, her hands balling into fists. Cassian raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard by her shift in demeanor. Excuse me. That absolute, undeniable, pathetic son of a bitch. Harley slammed her hand down on the table, making the silverware rattle. She didn't care that there were 4 armed mobsters behind her. She didn't care that the devil himself was sitting across from her. She had spent 3 hours crying in the bathroom, over her weight, over her worth, over a man who was literally setting her up to be murdered. 3 weeks, Harley yelled, glaring directly into Cassian's shocked grey eyes. 3 weeks of him texting me good morning. He told me he loved my curves. He told me he was intimidated by beautiful women. Do you know how long it took me to get ready tonight? I bought Spanx. I skipped lunch, and he wasn't even real. Cassian stared at her, utterly bewildered. The Don of the Moretti family, a man who made hardened criminals weep for mercy, was currently being shouted at by a furious plus-size woman in an emerald dress about her dating app woes. Are you telling me, Cassian said slowly, his tone dangerously quiet, that you do not work for Jared Tompkins? I work for a corporate logistics firm in the Loop, Harley snapped, digging into her purse and violently throwing her employee ID badge onto the table. I do payroll for dental hygienists. I met Jared on Bumble. He told me he liked thick girls and Italian food. He set the reservation under his name, told me to wait for him, and ghosted me. Cassian looked at the ID badge, then back up at Harley. His sharp eyes scanned her flushed, angry face, dropping for a split second to the rapid rise and fall of her chest before meeting her gaze again. The cold, dead expression he had walked in with was gone, replaced by a dark, intense curiosity. He had expected a weeping accomplice. He had expected a hardened criminal. He certainly had not expected a woman who, upon realizing she was in the crosshairs of the Mafia, was more enraged by the disrespect of being stood up than the guns in the room. He used you, Cassian stated, the realization dawning on him. He knew my men were tailing him. He set the date, gave us the location, and used you as the bait so he could slip out of the city while we converged on the restaurant. Yes, Harley let out a bitter, self-deprecating laugh, tears of sheer frustration finally spilling over her lashes. Because of course he did. Who would look twice at the fat girl sitting alone in the corner? I was the perfect, pathetic prop for his little escape act. She aggressively wiped a tear from her cheek, ruining her perfectly applied winged eyeliner. So there you have it, Mr. Moretti. I don't have your $4 million. I just have a maxed-out credit card from buying this stupid dress. If you're going to kill me, just get it over with. It'll probably hurt less than going back on Tinder. Silence stretched across the table. Behind Cassian, one of his lieutenants, a scarred man named Enzo, stepped forward. Boss, she's a civilian. A dead end. We should scrub the cameras and get back to hunting Tompkins. Cassian didn't look at his lieutenant. He didn't take his eyes off Harley. He watched the way she carried her defiance. Most people shrank under his gaze. They groveled. They begged. But Harley Bennett, broken-hearted and utterly betrayed, was staring him down with a fire that made his pulse thud heavily in his veins. He looked at the soft, generous curve of her jaw, the fiery flush on her cheeks, and the way her dress clung to her full, unapologetic figure. She thought she was invisible. She thought she was a prop. Cassian had never seen a woman take up a room quite like she did. Enzo, Cassian said softly, his eyes still locked on Harley. Take the men and lock down the airports. Tompkins has a 3-hour head start. Yes, boss. What about the girl? Harley held her breath, her anger finally giving way to the reality of her terrifying predicament. She closed her eyes, waiting for the order that would end her life. Instead, She heard the heavy scrape of leather against the floor. Harley opened her eyes. Cassian was standing up. He reached down, his large fingers gently but firmly wrapping around her wrist. His touch was burning hot against her cold skin. "The girl comes with me," Cassian said, his voice echoing with absolute authority. Harley panicked, trying to yank her hand away, but his grip was like iron. "What? No, you just said yourself. I have nothing to do with this. I told you everything I know. Let me go home." "You cannot go home, Gatina," Cassian said, his tone entirely unreasonable, yet dangerously smooth. "Jared Tompkins stole from me. He embarrassed my family. And he tied you to this mess the second he made you his alibi. If my rivals find out he used you, they will assume you know where the money is. You are a target." "I can call the police," Harley protested, her voice rising in pitch as he pulled her out of the booth. She stumbled against him, her soft curves colliding with the hard, muscular wall of his chest. Cassian looked down at her, his lips brushing dangerously close to her ear. "The police work for me," he whispered. "You have two choices, Harley. You walk out that door alone and hope the men Jared owes money to don't find you before morning. Or you come with me, and I guarantee you will never be afraid or overlooked again." Harley stared up at him, her chest heaving. "Why are you doing this?" she breathed. "I'm nobody. I'm just collateral damage." Cassian's hand moved from her wrist, his thumb gently tracing the line of her jaw, wiping away a stray tear. His eyes darkened with a sudden, possessive hunger that made Harley's breath hitch. "You were his bait," Cassian murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "But you're my prize." He snapped his fingers, and the heavy deadbolts on the front doors were thrown open by his men. "You're mine now," Cassian declared, leaving no room for argument as he guided her out into the dark. The ride to Cassian's compound was a blur of rain-slicked Chicago streets, viewed through the tinted bulletproof glass of a reinforced SUV. Harley sat rigidly in the plush leather seat, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Cassian sat beside her, radiating a terrifying magnetic heat. He didn't speak, but his presence was a heavy physical weight in the confined space. They bypassed the glittering high-rises of downtown, descending into a private subterranean garage, heavily guarded by men carrying automatic weapons. When the private elevator finally chimed and the doors slid open, Harley stepped into a penthouse that looked like it belonged to a modern emperor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying panoramic view of Lake Michigan. The air smelled of aged bourbon cedarwood and the lingering sharp scent of rain. "Sit," Cassian instructed, gesturing to a massive charcoal-grey velvet sofa. Harley sank into the cushions, wrapping her arms around her thick waist. Her emerald dress, which had made her feel so confident hours ago, now felt like a target painted on her back. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You said I was a target. How long do I have to stay here?" Cassian walked to a crystal decanter, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. "Until Jared Tompkins is dead, and until I have my $4 million back." He walked over, handing her a glass. His knuckles briefly brushed against hers, sending a jolt of electricity up her arm. "Drink. It will settle your nerves." Harley took a sip. The bourbon burned its way down her throat, settling as a warm knot in her stomach. Cassian took the armchair opposite her, his grey eyes mapping every inch of her face, dropping to the full curve of her hips, pressing against the velvet. "You are still shivering," he observed softly. "Are you afraid of me, Harley? You locked me in a restaurant with armed men and dragged me to a mafia stronghold." Harley shot back her natural defiance, briefly overriding her fear. "Yes, Cassian, I am absolutely terrified of you." A genuine dark chuckle rumbled in his chest. "Good. Fear is a survival instinct. But you don't need it here. No one in this building will touch a hair on your head. You have my word." Before Harley could process that, the elevator doors opened, and Enzo strode into the room, holding an encrypted tablet. His scarred face was grim. "Boss, we hit a dead end. Tompkins didn't go to O'Hare or Midway. We checked the train stations, the bus depots. He's completely vanished. Worse, the Gallagher syndicate is moving their men into the south side. We think Tompkins sold the offshore routing codes to Liam Gallagher to buy protection." Cassian's jaw clenched, a dangerous muscle ticking in his cheek. "If the Gallaghers get those codes, they empty my accounts. Find him, Enzo. Tear up every floorboard in the city." "There's a problem," Enzo said heavily. "Our tech guys scoured Tompkins' apartment. His hard drives were wiped clean with a military-grade magnet. He didn't take a flash drive with him. The perimeter cameras confirm he left the building empty-handed. He didn't have the codes on him when he went on the run." Cassian stood up, pacing the length of the Persian rug. "Then where the hell are the routing codes?" Harley frowned, staring down at her bourbon glass. Her mind raced back over the last 3 weeks of texts, phone calls, and digital flirting. Jared had been obsessive about his phone, and then a jarring memory struck her. "Wait," Harley whispered, setting her glass down on the glass coffee table with a sharp clink. Both men turned to look at her. "What is it?" Cassian demanded, crossing the room to stand over her. Harley dug into her purse and pulled out her phone. "At 6:30 tonight, right before I left for the restaurant, Jared sent me a text. He said he had a surprise for me, a special digital menu for Il Cigno Bianco that the chef only gave to VIPs. He told me to download the file and keep it open on my phone so the maitre d' would know to seat me." She unlocked her screen, her hands shaking, as she opened her messages. She found the text tapping the attachment. It was a massive file labeled Il Cigno _menu _encrypted.dat. I tried to open it in the cab, but it just crashed my phone, Harley explained, looking up at Cassian. I thought it was just a glitch, but he was so insistent. He texted me 3 times asking if it was downloaded. Enzo swore violently in Italian. Cassian's eyes widened slightly, a look of profound, chilling realization washing over his aristocratic features. He didn't take the phone from her hands. Instead, he leaned down, bracing his hands on the armrests of her sofa, caging her in. His face was inches from hers. "He didn't just use you as bait, Harley." Cassian murmured, his voice thick with a lethal combination of rage and awe. "He used you as a mule. He knew my men were watching his digital footprint. He couldn't email the codes to the Gallaghers, and he couldn't carry a physical drive without risking a search, so he embedded the entire financial ledger of my syndicate into a fake file and stored it on the phone of a woman he met on Bumble." Harley felt sick. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it was staggering. Jared had weaponized her trust. Cassian turned to his lieutenant. "Enzo, get the extraction team up here, now." As Enzo rushed to the elevator, Cassian looked back at Harley. The coldness in his eyes had entirely vanished, replaced by a scorching, possessive fire. He reached out his thumb, gently tracing her lower lip. "You brought the thief's treasure right through my front door," Cassian whispered, his voice dark and heavy with promise. "You are magnificent." It took Cassian's technicians less than 20 minutes to decrypt the file on Harley's phone. It was all there, the routing numbers, the Shell Corporation registries, and the $4 million safely secured behind a firewall. Cassian had his empire back. But Harley wasn't finished. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed against the glass coffee table. The caller ID was restricted, but she knew who it was. She looked at Cassian, who gave her a slow, deliberate nod. Harley answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Harley." Jared's voice crackled through the speaker. He sounded out of breath, panicked and desperate. Harley, thank God. Are you okay? Where are you? Harley dug her fingernails into her palms, channeling every ounce of humiliation she had felt sitting alone in that restaurant. I'm at home, Jared. The police came to the restaurant. They evacuated everyone. What the hell is going on? You stood me up. I am so sorry, baby. Jared lied smoothly, though the strain in his voice was obvious. There was an emergency at work. Very bad people are after me, Harley. I need your help. Remember that menu file I sent you? Yes, Harley said, her voice icy. I need you to bring your phone to me. Right now. If I don't get that file, these people are going to kill me. Why didn't you just keep it on your own phone? Harley asked, feigning confusion. Jared's mask of charm slipped his tone, snapping into something ugly and condescending. Because I couldn't, okay, just listen to me. I'm at the old shipping yards on Lower Wacker Drive, Pier 44. Get in a cab right now. Don't call the cops. Just bring the phone. I don't know, Jared, Harley said, letting her voice waver. It's late. I'm scared. Harley, listen to me. Jared snarled, his true nature bleeding through the receiver. Stop being a pathetic whiny bitch and do what I tell you. You think a guy like me actually wanted to take a fat cow like you to a Michelin star restaurant? You were a walking flash drive. Now bring it to me, or I swear to God I will find you and make you regret it. Silence hung heavy in the penthouse. Harley didn't cry. The pain was entirely eclipsed by rage. Before she could speak, Cassian reached down and ended the call. His face was a mask of absolute, terrifying calm. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. He didn't shout. He didn't break anything. But the look in his grey eyes promised a violence so profound it made Harley's breath hitch. Enzo, Cassian said quietly. Load the weapons. An hour later, the black SUV rolled to a silent halt near the damp concrete expanse of Pier 44. The air tasted of salt diesel and rotting timber. Fog rolled off the Chicago River, obscuring the towering cargo containers. Harley stepped out of the vehicle. She was still wearing the emerald wrap dress, but Cassian had draped his heavy cashmere overcoat over her shoulders to keep out the biting cold. It smelled of him, making her feel untouchable. Walk toward the pier, Cassian murmured, pressing a warm hand against the small of her back. I will be right behind you. I will not let him touch you. Harley nodded, her heels clicking softly against the wet pavement. She walked into the fog, her heart steady. She wasn't the victim anymore. Harley. Jared stepped out from behind a rusted shipping container. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and he held a cheap black pistol with trembling hands. Give me the phone. Now. Harley stopped 10 feet away. She didn't reach into her purse. She just stared at him, taking in the pathetic, shivering man who had made her feel so small just hours ago. You're a coward, Jared. Shut up! Jared aimed the gun at her chest. Throw the phone on the ground, you stupid cow. The Gallaghers are going to be here in 5 minutes. The Gallaghers aren't coming. A dark, resonant voice echoed through the damp air. Jared froze, the blood completely draining from his face. From the thick fog behind Harley, Cassian Moretti stepped into the dim glow of the halogen streetlights. He looked like the Grim Reaper in a tailored suit. Behind him, Enzo and a dozen heavily armed men fanned out their weapons trained directly on Jared. Jared dropped his gun instantly, his knees buckling. He hit the wet concrete, sobbing. Mr. Moretti. Boss, please. I can explain. It was the Gallaghers, they forced me. Cassian didn't look at Jared. He walked up beside Harley, placing his large hand protectively, possessively on the curve of her waist. He pulled her flush against his side, letting Jared see exactly where the power lay. You disrespected my family, Tompkins, Cassian said, his voice carrying over the sound of the crashing water. You stole from my syndicate, but worst of all, you insulted my woman. Jared stared in absolute horror at Cassian's hand resting on Harley's hip. Your woman. Harley, Cassian said softly, looking down at her completely, ignoring the weeping man on the ground. Does he live or does he die? Harley looked at Jared, the man who had mocked her body, used her trust and threatened her life. She felt the heavy, comforting weight of Cassian's arm around her. She wasn't just a prop anymore. She was the one holding the gavel. Take out the trash, Harley said coldly. Cassian smiled, a predatory, beautiful thing. He kissed the top of her head. Enzo, put him in the river. As Jared's screams faded into the night, dragged away into the darkness by Cassian's men, silence returned to the pier. Cassian turned Harley fully toward him, his hands sliding up to cup her face. The cold wind whipped her hair, but she felt entirely warm. He was wrong, you know, Cassian whispered, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His eyes dropped to her lips, burning with a fierce, undeniable hunger. You are not a prop. You are a queen. My queen. And I am going to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that tasted of danger power and absolute devotion. Harley kissed him back, gripping his lapels, finally stepping out of the shadows and into the empire she was always meant to rule. Did Harley make the right choice, embracing the dark, dangerous world of the Moretti Syndicate? Or did she just trade one prison for another? What would you do if a ruthless Mafia Don claimed you as his queen? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this high-stakes Mafia romance, don't forget to crush that like button. Share this story with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic storytelling.